pre-fader. That means these work whether the fader is up or down. It doesn't make any difference. They're ahead of the fader. That's what we want, because in some cases we may want to send more to the monitors than we send to the house. We can do that. We can turn the monitors up, we can turn the house down if necessary. Now, auxiliary 6 is post-fader, which means when I turn this control down for the choir, it not only quits going through the speakers, it quits going to the recording. That makes sense. So that's the difference between pre and post. These are automatically pre, these are automatically post. These can be switched from pre to post. Pre-fader means it's dependent. Pre-fader means it's independent of the fader. Post-fader means it is dependent. The post-fader controls go away when you lower the main fader. And that's by design, because it depends what you're doing with it. Okay, so I talked about the auxiliary. We've got 6 auxiliaries, and it looks like we're using 4 of them. So if you had another place you wanted to send sound, let's say you decided to get the drummer an in-ear monitor, you could feed one of these extra auxiliaries into the in-ear monitor and mix what he wants. And the reason I mentioned in-ear monitors is in a lot of situations with live music, you just get so much volume on the stage that the whole thing becomes unintelligible. And so they use in-ear monitors so the musicians can have it as loud as they want without the monitors coming out and interfering with the sound in the congregation. Okay, now the top section, the lighter gray area, is EQ. And general rule with EQ, don't do too much. And the reason you don't do too much up here is because over in the rack you have a digital processor that has a lot better resolution. It has filters that will go down to like 1/10 of an octave, where these controls are very broad. They control several octaves. And basically, we have tuned the room as close as is technically possible to perfection with the digital processor. And when you do too much here, you're basically throwing that off. So the general rule with EQ is, unless you have a really good reason to do otherwise, leave it flat. Now there's 2 ways to leave it flat. You know, now flat is a bad word if you're a singer, because it sounds like if you're flat, but flat in audio is a good thing. It means natural. Flat means bass, mid-range, treble. You actually have 2 mid-range. The black ones are all at the straight up and down position. That's neutral. You can accomplish the same thing by taking the EQ out of the circuit. If this button is out, these controls don't do anything. Now this is a really fancy equalizer section, because not only do you have bass, which is low frequency, and treble, you have mid frequencies, which are variable. The mid frequency can be brought down to 80 hertz, which is into the bass range, and then you can move it up as high as 1.9, which is like the 1.9 thousand, 1900, which is fairly high. It's kind of like a test tone on the radio. You know, when you say it's 12 o'clock and it goes beep, that's usually a 1 kilohertz tone, 1000 hertz, so that's pretty high. So these controls have 2 functions. You're adding or subtracting. In other words, these are level controls of the bass, for example, or the mid-range. I'm taking it away or I'm adding it, but here I'm actually changing the frequency where the filter works, which, if you do this professionally, it can be very helpful, but it takes a long time in the business before you can distinguish between 200 hertz and 500 hertz. Now, I've done this for, I hate to admit it, this is my 43rd year making my living in the sound business, and I could tell you the difference between 500 hertz and 1000, but I can't tell you the difference between 500 and 600. Your ear's just not that sensitive. I have a tool to measure it. Unless you're capable of distinguishing frequencies, this is not going to do you much good. It'll probably do you more harm. Now, when in doubt, just leave it straight or switch it out. If you want to take some liberty with an instrument or a CD or something, yeah, you can add some bass. You can take away some bass if a mic is too boomy, but anytime you anytime you turn these to the right, you're also increasing the possibility of feedback because you're creating a bump in the frequency response. You're adding more of a particular frequency, so that's the frequency that's going to feed back. So just kind of restrain yourself from doing a whole lot on the EQs when you're dealing with microphones, but that's what they're for. All right, now above the EQs there's a little button, and they logically put it close to the EQ because in a sense it's an EQ. EQ stands for equalizer, if I didn't say that. This is a low frequency filter. It says 100 hertz. Now 100 hertz is about the lowest range of the human voice. In fact, you know, if you got to have a fairly bassy voice, probably very few females get into the 100 hertz range. Their voice doesn't extend as low, but a good bass voice is going to have some content at 100 hertz. Not much in the human voice exists below 100 hertz. So these are sometimes called speech filters. If a microphone is being only used for speech, there's no reason to try to produce a lot of bass. In fact, it increases the rumble in the room and decreases intelligibility. So anytime a voice seems too bassy and not clear, push in that filter, and that just takes away the lowest frequencies, rumbling sounds, noise from the microphone, and so forth. The reason they're called speech filters is generally speech is more clear if you reduce some of the bass. See, bass is great for music, but you add too much bass in a large room when somebody's talking, and what happens is it excites the room, and pretty soon the sound is unintelligible, especially for older people. So, simple rule of thumb, if it's being used for speech, push it in. If it's being used for music, it can be out. There are a couple different parameters for adjusting the gain control. What I like to do is take a given microphone like this one. I want to make sure I'm on 0 here. This is the right choir mic. Now I'm going to go all the way to the top, and then I'm going to adjust this. There. Now you notice what I've done. I've pushed the choir mic all the way to the top. And then what I like to do is take this and bring it up slowly till she starts to sing a little bit. Right there. That's feedback. Now that obviously is all the volume that you can use. So why give yourself any more? You give yourself any more, all you're doing is increasing the chance of premature feedback. So if you do that, if you adjust any given microphone, when right at the top it's right at the brink of feedback, you'll probably find that it works pretty well at 0. And you're limiting the possibility of causing feedback, which always makes the operator look bad. And also keep in mind that that's only one microphone. When you get a half a dozen turned on, the possibility of feedback is going to increase. So that's how I generally set the gain control. Right at the point of feedback, and then you're going to find normal operation is at 0. If I'm finding normal volume is down here, that means the gain is set too high, and that means if I'm not thinking and I throw this up, it's going to be into feedback. Now if I'm all the way to the top and I can't hear anybody, I'm too low.